All right, so today we got the finals of SC Nephilim, one of the three finals. This time, Seto versus Midas, and I wanted to talk a little about the rule set. They're currently in card select, so we're just waiting for the game to appear. It has appeared. I wanted to talk about card selection in advance, but I suppose we might not have time. This is very interesting, though. Seto has picked an 8-2-8-2, which I think is often picked as a potential starter. Here, it does not actually have an obvious starter slot, given that there isn't something with an 8 facing out that can capture it. Though a bunch of really interesting things happening here. One is, Midas does not have an 8 in every direction, which is, I think, an unnecessary and important concession. Midas has a hand that potentially is good at recapturing itself and dealing with its own 7s, but is not necessarily good at dealing with 8s. And I get worried when I see this because, in my opinion, 8s are just substantially more powerful, right? An 8 can overpower a 7 cannot overpower an 8. Okay, interesting starter. The 7-7-5-3 does have both recaptures, and this is an 8 Midas' hand can't deal with. So I was thinking one of the main things entering this kind of matchup is, how do you deal with 8s? Because level 7s have a natural tool to do so, but level 6 does not. I should say the stipulations. This is level 6. All cards must have unique number combos. Level 7s, 7-5-7-5 is an easy crutch, or 8-6-4-6. These guarantee you have at least half coverage of every possible 8-8 corner. And 8-6-4-6, in fact, guarantees you have at least a capture on any corner at all. On 2 of the 4 possible corners, no matter what the numbers are. So those are easy crutches. Those guarantee you'll have coverage of 8s, and there are also cards like 8-6-6-3s or 8-7-6-4s that are very easy to set up to cover a lot of things. Level 6, it's a lot harder. So I really like the 7-3-5-8. I think that's a pretty powerful card. I was thinking if I was playing this, I'd probably go 7-3-5-8 and 5-8-7-2 as a pair. Seto has gone 4-8-7-2, which might be the smarter way to go. My way has a little more synergy potential on the 5s touching, but Seto's guarantees it's easy for blank to recapture 4-8-7-2's backside. And there's a good argument that's the better way to go. I didn't really consider it, but looking at it now, it looks like the smart choice. Midas has one 8-8 corner. I think a huge question is, can you just play a lot of 8-8 corners here? It is difficult to deal with 8s. And if we look at these hands, where, for instance, could Seto handle an 8-8 corner comfortably? In 1, Seto can recapture from 2 and from 4, so he has that one covered. In 3, Seto cannot touch it. He potentially has ways to set up against it with, for instance, 7-7-5-3 and 5. So his hand, we can see, has some good plussing capabilities. An 8-8 in 7 is covered by 7-7-5-3, and an 8-8 in 9 is covered by 7-3-5-8. So Seto has pretty good 8-8 coverage. He either has it immediately covered or has ways to set up synergy. Now, if you met an 8-8 corner in 3 with 7-7-5-3 and 5, if the other person had ways to take it too, you wouldn't be that excited, because both your capturing cards in 2 and 6 have relatively weak numbers outfacing, and that might make it easy for them to force the action, force you to play 4-8-7-2 and 2, and then recapture it from 1 with a, 7 or 8 outfacing you can't deal with. Specifically an 8, probably. 8s are just very strong. Whenever there's a rule set that's on an awkward level or has weird stips, I just always wonder, can you just pick the most powerful corners and just give them trouble? And that's why this is sort of where I'm starting to address this position. Midas goes in the opposite corner. And he does not have the recapture. So the big question is, what is he intending to do against 4-8-7-2 and 2? He does not have the immediate recapture there. My guess is he's intending to go in 4. Though there's also, he could just... Nope, my guess is he's intending to play 1-7-7-7 in 1, which I suspect is good for, at least neutralizing Seto's play here. That looks like a nice idea. Because it also threatens after, maybe to put something in 4, maybe not. Alright, so I think the plan is if Seto goes in 2, Midas goes in 1. There's also the possibility of going in 4. Something with a 7 to the right sets up a same in 5. So you could specifically do that with 1, 7, 7, 7, and 4, and that sets up 7, 4, 5, 7 to have a same or plus in both 1 and 5. And that could be really powerful as well. So it does look dangerous for Seto to take this, I think. I'm going to ask Deli what he thinks. Seto also has the option to build out from his starter, right? If he plays an 8, he locks in 7. That looks like the other very natural thing to do. In general, when someone builds out from their starter like that, usually one of 2 responses will happen. If you block 8, either Midas will try to find safety in 9, which as long as Seto keeps both 7, 3, 5, 8 and 5, 2, 8, 7 in his hand, there's no obvious way to do so. Or you play in 2 or 6 to build out from your own starter. Now, Midas's preferential way to build out, I think, would be in 2, because that's the square where Seto has a threat on his starter. However, I tend to prefer building out from 6 if possible. Building out from 2 often leads to the Z, or leads to them having a nice move in 1. While building out in 6, you give up 9, but you often have something really nice to set up in 5. And here it looks like Midas would likely build out in 2, so I think that would be the slightly weaker way. I think in general, though, I would just be drawn to slightly higher powered hands than this. And I think one disadvantage of having 7s on Midas's side is on second turn, it's just harder for you to find safety whenever the kind of half squares are opened up. And by that I mean, like, if Seto plays in 8, it would be nice if you could sneak something into 9. Now, Seto has everything covered in 9 no matter what, but it's a lot easier when you have more 8s on your cards, or more of whatever the max number is, to sneak into those squares. Now, that said, it's not really clear what Seto should put in 8. For instance, if 4, 8, 7, 2, and 8, there's a good case that, Midas can just play 7, 4, 5, 7, and 9. The 7 outfacing is great, because if 5, 2, 8, 7, and 6, Midas now has a same in 5. So actually, Midas might have really good play against 8. Alright, Deli thinks if 4, 8, 7, 2, and 2, Midas would play in 4, not 1. I think he's probably right. But what card has been picked up? It's the 7, 7, 5, 3. Now, if that goes... Okay, so that didn't go in 8. I was thinking if that goes in 8, it's very combo susceptible. So here, bunch of options for Midas. 2 looks pretty appealing. 1, 7, 7, 7, and 2. Admittedly, 4, 8, 7, 2 has both 1 and 5, but Seto has 1 really nicely, but no card for Seto has 5 very well, and Midas has big threats in both squares, and importantly, 7, 4, 5, 7, and 5 does not set up Seto in 6, and it does set up Midas potentially in 8, though he might not be able to utilize that. So my instinct here is 1, 7, 7, 7, and 2. Again, I sort of had the thought, if they build out from their starter, I often want to build out from mine. And I like building out towards where they built out if I can set it up so I have 5 and they don't. Because 1 will almost always be really valuable, and they'll kind of have to occupy 1, especially if they don't have 5, right? Because if they don't have 5 and I go in 1, they have nothing in return. So they kind of, if I go 2, they kind of have to go 1. And then if I have a nice move in 5, that can often be good to really press. And it sets up a plus in 8, a same in 6. So 1, 7, 7, 7 in 2 looks quite promising. Another thing is we could just attack Seto's starter, right? We could play an 8. anything with a 7 to the right is comboed. So that leaves us with 7457 or 8814. 8814, there's a same in 5. Midas has a plus wall back in 9. You wonder if Seto could play in 6 there, because he already has a threat in 5, so if he could create a threat in 9 as well. But he will not be able to create a threat with the same card, I don't think. So I'm not sure on that. 8814 and 8 seems difficult to play. If it happened, I think how the game would continue is Seto would play in 1 with 4872 and just say, I have 2 cards safe, I have 1 and 4 safe, and you're really under threat in 5. And it's going to be tough for you to block 5 and feel good about it because it concedes 2. So I think 8814 and 8, 4872 and 1, I would guess is a tie, but I would think it's Midas who has to be careful there. And if 7457 and 8, which gives Midas the same in 5, not sure there. I guess one point is maybe Seto can again just play in something like 1, and if Midas does take 5, Seto gets a combo in 6, but the move order never works such that he's actually the one playing in 6 there. So I think 7457 and 8 could be a good move. I am drawn to 1777 and 2. There's also 1. Anytime a square has, 1 out-facing square, considering what happens if I go there. But it doesn't look very promising. 8814 and 1 is just taken by 5287, and you set up nothing for 5. Something like 4747 and 1. Are we that excited to get taken by 7358? All right, Deli also likes going in 2. Usually a good sign for a move. There's also 6, but 6 doesn't make that much sense to me. It doesn't block in 3 very well, right? It's a side that wasn't attacked. So I think Midas has to be deciding between 2 and 8 here. Occasionally there's logic for 9, but I don't think in this spot. There's also occasionally logic for 5, but A, I'm terrible at finding those moves, and B, I think the logic for 5 is you keep calculating out other lines and finding the opponent hits you with something big in 5, or that you have something you really wanted put in 5 in a bunch of different lines, and that leads you to going in 5. So I think squares like 5 and 9, not really worth considering. I wouldn't consider 6. I think in general it's between 1, 2, and 8, and here one of the moves in 8 and one of the moves in 2 quite appeal. I should start putting the game in my database. Seto Midas. Seto's hand was 8282, 5287, 4872, 7753, and 7358 versus 8814, 5287, 7457, 4747, 1777. Sorry, it's very boring to hear me say. And the game went 8282 and 7. I just don't like leaving dead air. I feel awkward. 5287 and 3, 7753 and 4. Okay. I am predicting 2. I also think 8 is logical. And I don't really think any other moves are logical, which does not mean if he goes somewhere else it's bad. 8814 and 8 might well work. I think you got to be really careful after 4872 and 1. Okay, well, that was very much not my expectations. That is a very weird move, right? You have no recapture in 6, but I guess anything they take with from 8 you can combo. You do have recaptures in 8, but you're probably locked into 4747. Very strange move. All right. If you're Seto here, 4872 is safety in 1. So that is inherently appealing. And you don't really have a way to block 8. I guess the point is, I think you can't block 8 very well. If you use 5287, you've given up any threat at all in 6. And if you use either of the other cards, I have combos. Now, I'm not actually sold on that, right? Like, if 4872 in 8, are you really going 4747 in 5? You take a 7-3 lead, but now I can happily go... Oh, maybe that's a good point. I was thinking I can happily go 5287 and 6, and I take a card, and I'm down 6-4, and I have a good card at the end, but I do not have a good card at the end. I have 7-3-5-8. So this is a good point. 4872 and 8 doesn't work. So it might be hard to block 8 here. Can you block 1? This idea has more point than I gave it credit for. Because if you block 1 with 4872 and Midas plays in 8, say with 4747, he has the point 5287 can never go in 6 without being comboed. Yeah, so Delhi's on 5287 in 8, which does look like the way to avoid all this. But okay, this had more cleverness than I thought. I missed that that was a plus. So I wonder if Midas did as well. I just treated that 2 as it's never capturing anything. And now this looks terrible. But okay. You just gotta calculate outlines. 8814 is safe in 1, so that's a clear candidate move. If 8814, if Seto goes in 2 with 4872, then Midas is dead. Yeah, that's just game. Yeah, this looks like death. So I would look at 2, right? We really need a little combo potential somewhere. But I don't... Maybe 8814 and 2. Does that do anything? Kind of can't, because 4872 now has the plus wall in 1. Very strange game here. Alright, Midas did miss the plus. So, yeah, it happens. I do think Midas would have had a little ability to push if he went in 2. And as we saw, if you miss the plus here, this move, you know, maybe isn't great, because 5287 and 8 looks pretty comfortable. But, like... It's still tricky, though, right? Because if you want to block 6 in... I guess you don't need to block 6 in there. So maybe you can play 1. But you don't have... My point was, you don't really have a good way to block 6 in there. 7-3-5-8, having the plus against any 7 facing out from 6 is tough. Yeah. 9, quite strange. I sort of have this thesis that a lot of players try to do fancy, complicated things, and everyone should be trying to simplify how they play Triple Triad. But I don't know. Strange game. I think the first 3 moves were really interesting. And, you know, Seto pounces on things. You just... there's... I think people like myself and Yojimbo and Great Sephiroth have the big reputations as calculators. But I've said it before, I never see Seto mess up late game positions. All the losses I see, the positions were suspicious before move 5, right? It's never blown on move 5. It's blown move 4 or earlier. And that's just really remarkable. And anytime you give ground against him, it's just kind of game over. I think Seto's relative weakness is probably hand building, because I think he's an incredible player for tournament format play. Midas, I think here in the finals, he landed on 2 level 6 or 6/7 sets, and both times he went for this massive 7s. And I think these are just overly weak cards as well. And I really liked his card selection in prior rounds, especially on the split level sets. But I think here he's been drawn to just fundamentally weaker cards. And I think that's too big a concession. If I was playing this set, not that I've thought a ton about it or that I'm all that great a hand maker, but I'd have really been thinking, how many 8/8s can I put together, and can I get my 8/7/5s in there? And just like looking for excuses to use more powerful cards. And I don't know if my video on my game with Seto will come out first, but I do think 7/7. I talk a lot about hand making in that one. My game against Midas. Did I say Seto? I don't know what I'm talking about. My game against Midas. But I do think just in general, 8 is bigger than 7, and Slash of Time was onto something with his big numbers, especially on second turn. I think it's just so tough. On the final turn of the game is the easiest example. If your hand is all 7s, it's just tough to give them something they can't force a capture of at the end. And I think that applies throughout the game of kind of every time there's a half safety. And so what you got to do with hands like that is you really have to maximize synergies. And I think Midas tried to do so with 9, because if Seto doesn't have that move in 8, and even pretend it doesn't plus, let's just pretend that move doesn't exist, Midas has a lot of combo play against anything in 8. But I think the actual way to do so, given that it didn't set up any combo play in 6, was to go in 2. Because 2 you can set up both 1 and 5. And that seems the more desirable way to do this, I think. All right. But I think it's tough to play these hands. And Seto is so quick, he's just going to instantly play his wins. We call Akiyama the fastest now, but there's another guy as fast as Akiyama, and it is Seto. I will say, I think if Midas had first turn, the hand probably works a little better. I also just don't like 1777 in general. I don't know. I think it's hard to handle these hands. But on the other hand, I think after 2, he is a pretty good position. We can bring that up if we want on the solver and see where this all went wrong. Give me a moment. But I think we know where it went wrong. There was a plus missed, and the move was maybe a little shaky anyway. Nicely played by Seto. Remains just absolute top tier player. And more capable of being that without playing that actively than anyone else on the planet. So 177 goes in 2. Our final move will be 487, 2, and 1. And that's going to be a 7-3. Oh, poor Midas. Poor Midas. Yeah, so Midas had an awesome run to make this finals. Probably the toughest run of anyone to make the finals, given that he beat Slash of Time, he beat Tezuka, DJ had an awesome run to make the semifinals, he beat him too, and kudos, but this hand's tough to pull off. So let's switch over to the solver. I think I put the hands in correctly. And that should be coming out. And I'm just curious, you know. So this, I think, was a pretty good starter. I like it. I like stuff that you can recapture. I like getting the utility card out of the hand. I think Midas made a really solid reply. And yeah, the solver likes how both of them are playing so far. Seto went in 4. Forget what I was expecting here. Maybe 8? But this move looked good. This move looked good. Probably better than what I was thinking. I was thinking you might be able to go here, but might not be able to get away with it due to something like this, which does indeed tie. All right. And then Midas went here, which loses, and loses to 5-2-8-7. It should be noted, if it didn't flip, I think it would tie, if there wasn't the plus. Just barely, but I think it would tie. Now, what about the other moves we looked at here? This, I thought, was complicated, but probably tied. And it does tie. Nice. Actually, it's kind of hard to tie this for Seto. All right, this might have been the best move. I underrated that one. We'll come back to that. Here has a tie, and specifically this is a tie. But we don't actually have to be as careful as I thought. What was my other idea? Here, I think. Here, also a tie. And Seto has to be careful. Actually, any move in 1 loses. So I think in this position, this card here or this card here would have put real substantial pressure. And these are good positions to solve, and I should probably stop and solve them, but I want to make this a functional video. So here, Seto has 2 ties. Can you find them? Feel free to pause. I will give what the ties are in 10, 9, 8. Now I'm going to speed up, but, you know, take your time to pause if you want to try to solve. There are 2 ties, and the first tie is this, which is wild and I would not be finding here. And the second tie is this, which makes a lot more sense to me, but is hard to find. But the point is, you now do have a threat in 5, and you have a card for 1, and you're just barely pulling together enough stuff in your hand to work there. And Midas says pretty sure the position was winnable, and yeah, I don't think it was a win based on the solver, but this is certainly, you know, a move like this. If they have to find here, that's tough to find. You know, you have to eliminate options in 1 and start looking elsewhere. And that is non-trivial to save. And against this one, against this one, there are 2 ties. And again, you can pause and try to find them. I think the simpler one, note, my idea of going here does not work. This absolutely loses to either of these 2 cards in 2, where there's just nothing to take. Yeah, you're behind too much. And there's no setups. Yep. So I completely misevaluated that one. The ties, first of all, there's this, where there's safety, but unlike the safety in 1, it doesn't immediately give up more safety to the opponent, right? Midas cannot play in 6 without giving up something big in 5. So this would have been the better version of that idea. And the other tying idea here is, no, not that, is this, setting up the double combo potential. So those are both tough saves. And I think probably Seto more likely to find them than literally any other human. But you do... Both of those ideas got a pretty nice position for Midas, who played a really nice move in 3, had a very promising position here and got fancy. And specifically got fancy missing a plus. Now, if we pretended the plus wasn't there, how can we do this? We're going to turn the 5287 into a 5187 and see what happens. All right. So we're going to reload this and make sure, see how this worked. So if it doesn't flip, yeah, Midas has ample ties here. He doesn't have a win, but he has ample ways to tie. He has ties in 1, ties in 6, ties in 2, or a tie in 2, multiple ties in 2. There's a tie in 5. Yeah. So Midas would have full ability to pick how he wanted the game to finish here. And he says 8 tied. Yeah, 8 did tie, but with some pressure. So I guess that's it. Interesting game, complex position here. And the move in 9, certainly creative, but doesn't seem it led to enough here. And just nicely played by Seto. To beat Seto, you have to get a huge advantage early, and just tough. So, okay, that's it for this Nephilim Finals. I have no idea what order I'm going to show the Finals games in, but yeah, so let's not comment on whether the other two have happened or what happened in potential other matchups that occurred. Keep the tension here, and yeah. Level 6, very tricky rule set. I've never had a good feel for it. Just fundamentally, anything there is tough to handle. I do love 8753s. Seto used it, so he deserved to win. I like 8752s. I'm surprised no one went for 8616. I think that's a good way to have coverage of 8s. That's like a pretty powerful card. And so I'm sort of surprised that neither players used those, that there was only one 8-8 corner. So unexpected hand decisions to me. And maybe the 8616 doesn't play well against 8-7s. Just feels like coverage of 8 is so meaningful, but clearly the players saw the rule set quite differently than I did. Where Seto saw some need to cover 8s, multiple 7-3-5 cards in hands. But for the most part, these hands do not look like they're built with 8s are terrifying as the prime order of business. And maybe I overly react to the big threats. I used to, on level 10 sets, run 8876s too much, or 8866s, just because I was so afraid someone would start an AA corner rare against me, and that was just a misunderstanding. But I do think 8s are really hard to deal with on level 6, and potentially 8-8 corners would have been strong. We looked at Seto's hand, but how would Midas's hand have replied to different 8-8 corners? An 8-8 corner in 1, Midas can take from 2, but not from 4. An 8-8 corner in, let's pretend this is an 8-8. An 8-8 corner in 3. Midas can't take. Does he have ways to set up against it? Not quite. An 8-8 corner in 9? Nope. And an 8-8 corner in 7. Just again, pretending these are 8-8s. I guess there's coverage from 8. But that's two 8-8 corners that Midas's hand basically just wouldn't have been able to deal with. And I think that's a pretty big concession. And even though he didn't face 8-8s here, what I think it suggests is maybe an undervaluing of the big corners. because they sort of have two really important features. One is they can potentially be starters, right? If the opponent's hand is not equipped to deal with your 8/8, here we have one in Midas's hand. And you'll notice Seto's opening move immediately blocked the square that 8/8 could go naturally, right? It immediately cut that corner out of the game to some extent. And I didn't actually consider what if, I was busy talking about hands, what if Midas just goes for it? I don't know if there's a super punish there or something. I'm not seeing one instantly. I assume Seto would take back. He has a threat in 5. So Midas probably has to block 5. Yeah, this doesn't look great for Midas. Okay. So we probably shouldn't have done that. So it was nice of Seto to block the 8/8 corner that Midas potentially had, because these are just really tough to deal with. But you could easily see if Seto had a corner for 3 or 9, that could easily have put Midas's hand in turmoil. And I just think it's easy for them to work that way. And then the second thing they can do really nicely is kind of as the board fills up, right? As moves happen, they're a card that, has a chance to find safety in 1. Or if you need something that's easily recapturable, you can always, drop something like this, where actually this looks like a pretty interesting move, where you put out stuff that's really easy to take back. And so I think there's a lot of uses for 8/8s, and on levels 5, 7, and 10, it's pretty easy to deal with the big corners. You just have a lot of tools to do so. And on most other levels, you don't have nearly as many tools. And so as soon as I'm on another level, I talk about this too much in other videos, so I'll shut up now. But I think there's just a real case for the high cards. And that doesn't mean you want to run like 4 8/8 corners, because they do not play that well off each other usually. But having 2 in your hand, for instance, I think Acela basically did perfect hand building every round of the tournament. And if you want to build tournament hands better, one suggestion is to look at what hands Acela used this tournament and just try to build like Acela did. Because honestly, I think Acela put an incredible tournament together. I was really lucky to beat them in the semifinals. And I think every round, except maybe against me when it was pretty balanced, but basically every round they put up a large advantage in hand making and then just played beautifully to bring it home. And so for instance, against me, on a level 8 set, they used 2 9/9s, which was the maximum power available. On a level 8 and 9 set, I should say. Or what was the set? I'm blanking now. It was the level 9, no A's in your hand. So, had 2 9/9s and then 2 9/8s that played nicely with them. So not massing 9/9s, because those don't play that well off each other, right? None of them inherently have recaptures on the others. But using 2 of them, taking that power, and then picking more dynamic cards for the other slots that played well off them. And that's my instinct in hand building these days, is to really make sure there's a lot of that raw power. Interesting game. Would have been interesting to see it play out if, 2 was played instead of 9, or if 9 hadn't conceded the plus, which I missed as well, so hard to blame Midas too much for that. Or 8 was played. Midas did mention he thought 8 tied, but 8 applied some pressure. 8 was, in this position, obviously the 5-1-8-7 should be a 5-2-8-7. I switched that. But either of these cards in 8, I don't think Midas is losing that game. And there's maybe a slight chance Seto is. So, there you go. That is one match of our Nephilim finals.